So let's go ahead and start configuring some of these actions. Remember, there's two ways to configure actions. Click on the ellipsis, choose configure, or simply double click on the action itself. Now, here we're going to fill out these required fields, and in here we have to, which is one of the required fields, and this is going to be the recipient of the email. I can hard code a value in, but there could be multiple requesters within this workflow. It's not going to be one individual, so we're going to need a dynamic variable in order to actually go and send these emails out. And what we want to use is a item property. So I'll click on the ability to insert a reference, which is that little notepad icon, and that's going to bring open an additional screen. And so what we want to do is we want to take a look at some workflow contextual information as it relates to this workflow. And what that means is we want to choose the initiator. So in the workflow context, who's the initiator of the workflow? That's going to be the recipient of this email. And so we choose workflow initiator, and now we've got workflow context initiator in here. And then we're not going to do a CC or BCC, but we want to have the subject be dynamic too. So we can notify them that your request for, and what we want to do is we want to use the item property for the title of the request that they've made. So how we do that is, as we've clicked into the field, the input field for subject, on the right-hand side, our insert reference screen has appeared. And in here, we've got item properties. Now remember, item properties are the metadata associated with that item. And so what we can do is find title, as title is the item property that holds the title of the request. And double click on that, and now you can see we've got this token for current item title in here. And so whatever value that is will be filled out into the subject line. So we'll click on that, and we'll also fill out the rest of the subject, and we'll say has been submitted. And so there's our notification. And the last thing we have to do is fill out the body. And so we can say hello, and then we can actually choose the initiator's name. Once again, our item reference panel is on the right-hand side, and we'll choose workflow context. And in here, what we want is the initiator display name. And then we'll go ahead and fill out some more information. Your request has been submitted. And then we'll go ahead and click on save. And so now you can see that we have our configured action. On those actions that are not configured, you see we still have that warning mark because there's required data that's not filled out for them. For the actions that have been configured, that icon no longer exists. What I want to do also is I want to denote what we're doing with this actual action. So if you're looking at the designer canvas quickly at a heads up glance, you know what we're doing. So if you click on the title of the action itself, you'll be able to edit that action title. And so we're going to say send an email initiator. So you know who's going to be getting an email here. Next, we want to go and assign a task. And so I'll double click on the assign a task action. And there's a lot to cover within this action itself, but we're going to speed through it just to make sure you guys understand the general purpose of this. So in participant, we want to send this off to the manager. Now, once again, we can hard code a value for a participant, but this is dynamic, and we want to send it to the manager of whoever the initiator is. To do that, we'll click on Insert Reference again. And we want to go to the Workflow Context section as it relates to the contextual workflow, and we'll choose the drop-down here. Now, what we want is manager email address. Using user profile services, we'll go ahead and take a look at who the manager is for the initiator. We can take the email address property and use that as the value. If I select this, you'll notice that a warning comes up for requires the user profile service to be working in your environment. So long as that's working and synced correctly with the right data there for the manager's email address, everything will work just fine. Click on Insert, and there you go. Now we have our participant. The task title can be a dynamic value as well, but we'll just say new task. And you can fill out additional information such as description, due date, and related item, but this time it relates to the current item. We have the default outcomes of approved and reject. If we did want to add an additional outcome, simply click on add outcome and add a value for that outcome, and that will be a third branch of logic depending on what the outcome is for the task. But we'll just use approved and rejected. You also have assignee options here. You can customize the email that's sent out for the task itself. You can set up lazy approval, which is an option to have a outcome denoted by not actually going into the task form itself, but allowing the user to respond with one of these values, approved or rejected, up top as the first line by itself on the top of the email, and then the workflow will proceed based on the outcome. You also have the ability to do reminder emails and set the frequency of those reminder emails. And then you also have escalate and cancellation options too. But we filled out all the required fields here, so we'll click on save. What's important next is to go and update that list item. So we're going to go and say we want to work within the current item itself. And that makes sense because that's the item we want to update. We'll choose the list item property to update. So what metadata do we want to associate with that list item property? Remember, the list item property is based off the column title that we're working with. And we created the column title called delivered. And we'll add that here. Now, it's smart enough to know what data type we're working with. And delivered is a yes/no Boolean type column, which gives us the ability to denote the value, or we could actually put list lookup or workflow context or variables within here, but we're just going to use the yes or no options. If it's been approved, delivered gets marked to yes. And so we'll simply click on save. We can then send out emails to the initiator if it's been rejected, and we'll go ahead and choose the contextual initiator value here and say your request has been rejected, and we'll give them a note. Okay, so now we have our fully configured workflow. We can update the task title and also the action titles for update list item and update emails, but you already saw how we do that.